The Fed15 podcast is presented by Serving Those Who Serve, a fiduciary, fee-based financial planning firm serving federal government employees and retirees all over the country. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be taken as financial advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. The opinions expressed by our hosts are their own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of either Raymond James or Serving Those Who Serve. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Fed15 podcast presented by Serving Those Who Serve. We are your hosts, Katelyn and
Dan
Sipe in pink. For those of you who are coming back to join us yet again, welcome back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very special welcome to you. Each week, we discuss the latest news and info that feds need to know in 15 minutes or less. So whether you're a seasoned federal employee or just starting out in your career, Fed15 has got you covered. So grab your coffee, kick back, and we are going to let you know what you need to know, what happened in the Fed space this week that you might have missed as you were living your life, working your job, doing all of that fun stuff. So as returning viewers will notice, we have a bit of a change on the podcast today. The man in black, 2 weeks running, is wearing a lovely salmon. He's joining us in a...
Well, this is actually hot pink. Hot pink. Thank you to Jeff Bezos and the good people at Hanes. Oh man, I just felt like I was on the Tonight Show for a minute. Forgetting this to me quickly. This because you had said hot pink, and I had the salmon shirt. It's like, you know what? They asked for hot pink, no shutdown, so I went for the hot pink. So, crisis.
Much
like the Lannisters, I pay my debts.
I told Dan earlier that we're slowly transitioning this podcast from a federal topics podcast into a nerd and geek culture podcast, having covered Star Trek, Star Wars, and now making open Game of Thrones references. Next week, we're going to just be playing Settlers of Catan as we record.
I see no deficiencies in this model, Katelyn. I'm a little bit lost. But yeah, I understand. You definitely are so central to our mission with Serving Those Who Serve and what you do here. And also, Katelyn is also a brilliant financial advisor and as a tremendous hands-on care person for the folks who work with us in our fiduciary financial planning group. But Katelyn's pretty busy in general. And you've got an outside project that you've been working on that's kind of fun. Why don't you let the folks know a little bit about that?
I do. Katelyn is busy in general is probably the understatement of the year. I support a theater, homegrown local theater in Southwest Virginia called Smokestack Theater Company. And we have a very busy October. For those of you who don't know, some clients listening might already know this, but my undergraduate education was actually in theater and dance, much like Dan, who also is a theater person.
No dance.
No dance, just theater, straight theater.
Although I did take one ballet class.
There you go. Everybody needs a ballet class in life.
Yep.
So we have a pretty busy October. We're putting up 3 shows at one time. One just closed this past weekend, and it was kind of like a historical research show. So we put together historical profiles around people who actually lived in this area of Virginia, and then presented that in the community market as theatrical pieces. So instead of reading a story about somebody who, grew up in this area and did something significant, you actually got to meet them, their ghost.
Oh, very cool. Very Williamsburgy.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. We're doing a similar sort of concept that's more like a ghost tour, but it's interactive, where the ghosts interact with you. And they're all based in history. They're all real people who actually lived, we did a lot of research and wrote the show ourselves. So it's an originally produced piece. And then we have a main stage production of Misery, which is the stage play of the movie. Yes. And I have done fight choreography and acting coaching for that. It's a very interesting show. So lots going on for us. Very glad to have avoided a government shutdown. So yeah. Lots on the plate. Lots of exciting stuff, though. Very good to kind of exercise, and I encourage clients to do this as well. Exercise your creative brain. as well as your analytical brain. It's good to kind of have that well-rounded experience. I think it keeps us young and it keeps us on our toes. So.
Couldn't agree with you more. We hear a lot about STEM. I'm a big fan of STEAM. So you just add the A to it to get the arts in there. And I think we are a better world when we are immersed in our artistic side as well. So yeah, let's get to it because we do have some things to cover. And yes, thank you to the folks on Capitol Hill. Thank you that we averted the government shutdown, 335 to 91 in the House, and then 88 to 9 in the Senate. I call that bipartisan. So thank you. I know we got some other bumpy stuff in here. The only time that I go political is when it's going to hurt my feds. So I'm just going to say thank you. There's things that are in it. There are things that are out of it that people will debate, complain about, what have you. But more to the point, we are through to November 17th. Now let's focus on the business of governing. But they've actually got some pretty important things to address here. Katelyn, as you know, we have recently, people asked and we answered, started webinars for special provisions people. Among that group would be federal firefighters. And I mean, talk about just a group of heroes out there. Well, they've got a pay cliff that we've got to handle here. So this is another request going up to the Hill. In 2022, via executive order, their pay was increased by about 50% or $20,000, whichever is less. And the funding would have run out with a shutdown, but there's also a pay cliff. This needs to be acted upon by November 4th. And hey, folks, come on. Can we agree that people that are running into a fire are the very definition of heroes? And so let's mop this one up. If you can hear me on the Hill, let's get this taken care of by November 4th. I'm perfectly fine with somebody who on my behalf is fighting a blaze, getting a 50% pay bump. I'm totally fine with that. Let's help them to keep it. And Katelyn, there was an interesting thing that in this case will not be an issue, at least until November 17th. But there was a little bit of a hiccup relative to our friends over at the IRS. You may recall that there was a significant increase in their budget. And their belief was, in the interpretation, was that would keep them fully operational through a shutdown. Then OPM let them know that those funds would not be available. So had this gone through, the IRS would have needed to furlough 2/3 of its workforce and shutter most call centers. And most people don't think about this, but there's 2 tax days. There's April and then there's October. Okay, so yes, there was additional funding in the Inflation Reduction Act, but there was a misread on the part of IRS leadership. So we're very, very glad that our folks at IRS were not hit with that. But see, that's the thing with the shutdown. You simply don't know what the unintended consequences will be. So again, up on the Hill, thank you. Let's keep this going. Got to get a speaker now. I think that needs to be the next sort of business. And then let's get back to the business of governing and taking care of the citizens of the United States and always making sure we take care of our feds as well. So that's what I got, Katelyn. What you got?
Couldn't agree more. Well, it's that time of the month again. We've got to do a TSP roundup, look at some fund performance numbers. Obviously, September, particularly the second half of September, a little bit more choppy markets. Through the summer, we had some pretty good growth, some pretty good market rallying. And then really, it honestly was the last week, maybe last 2 weeks of September that we kind of saw a bit of backsliding. I'm certainly nowhere near where we were December 2022, but there has been a little bit of a shift, a downshift, let's say, in recovery. Obviously, a couple of reasons for that. We've got the continued threat of higher interest rates. That can cause a market contraction, a market pullback. People are less likely to spend when the cost of capital is much higher. See that obviously with housing. There's so many folks that I hear just on a day-to-day basis talking about how now is not a great time to buy a house. I will mention refinancing is a thing. So if you're in that boat, it doesn't necessarily mean a big no or a permanent no. Refinancing is a thing. Talk with a qualified advisor on that if you don't have one.
Well, there's at least one person on this podcast that came through double-digit mortgage rates.
Yeah.
I'll let the viewers guess which one of us. It's me, by the way. So it doesn't necessarily crater the world.
Yeah.
It's not fun, but we can get through it.
Right. Yeah. And, like I said, refinancing is a thing. There could be opportunities for lower interest rates later on. I always tell my clients it's our job to educate you on what is the financially savvy decision, what is the most beneficial financial decision, but also your life shouldn't be ruled by that. So if you've got other plans, there's always ways to pivot, work around things. Obviously, another big threat to the market really right now, fear around inflation. We do have a fairly resilient employment market.
Yeah, we got another surprise today, right? With surprisingly good jobs numbers.
Yep. Yeah. So, it's not all doom and gloom. We had a little hiccup in September. It's possible that we could recover and continue the recovery. Who knows? But, this month, obviously leading into TSP numbers, not a great month for TSP funds, but our year-to-date numbers are still going strong. So I'll draw your attention to that as we kind of dig down into this here. So for the month of September, C Fund, everybody's favorite, C Fund down 4.75% for the month of September. Year-to-date return still over 13%. S Fund down 4.9% for the month of September. Year-to-date just under 9% return there, positive. I Fund down 3.5%. Year-to-date total is just shy of 7% positive return. And then our F Fund down 2.5%. Year-to-date only down about 1%. We see that protracted contraction in the F Fund because the fixed income market is still kind of struggling to find its footing after the correction that we saw in 2022.
Sure.
So bonds still fighting their way back, which is fairly normal when bonds don't often get hit. When they do get hit, it takes much longer for that recovery to happen just because they're a little bit less bouncy than equity markets, for lack of a better term. And then G Fund, of course. G Fund returned 0.35% for the month of September. Year to date, it's just shy of 3%. So that's typically, when we run financial plans, comprehensive plans for clients of our firm, we look at base inflation rate around 3%. Long-term inflation runs about 2 to 2.25. We overstate that to provide a little extra wiggle room for higher inflation later on in the plan when we're looking at spans of 40 or 50 years. So our assumed conservative base inflation rate of 3%, G Fund year-to-date returning 3%, looks to be pretty on par with a cash position. So what I caution folks about when we look at these numbers, when we start seeing red on TSP fund returns, this is not the time to sell and put everything in G. Just because there's a little red on the statement, we don't need to sell out, take our toys and go home. Reason being, it's very difficult, when I am talking with feds and they say, oh, it might be time to, go completely to G. My first question is, okay, when are you going to get back in the market? Well, when things are better. How will you know when things are better? Well, when prices go back up. Well, when prices go back up, you have now sold at a loss and you're buying back in at that higher price. So I know, trust me.
Well, when you put it that way, Katelyn.
Right. I know that it feels like action is the right thing to do because that's the way that our minds are wired. But sometimes that's not the best move that you can make. And you guys know we're here for education only. None of this is financial advice. Consult with your advisor. If you don't have one, we would be happy to talk with you about kind of digging into the details so that we can provide some more information on that. But my kind of blanket statement is be resilient, take heed. If you have a strategy that is centered around your goals, your situation, your unique kind of financial landscape. Do not be afraid of a little red on your account statement. We do need to be resilient in choppy markets like what we're in.
Indeed.
So that's my soapbox for the week.
Sage advice.
Excellent.
Well, that's about all our time, folks. We'll be back next week to bring the latest updates that you need to make informed decisions for your career and financial well-being as a Fed.
Absolutely. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube channel, Fed Life, so that you never miss an episode. And please do remember to share it with your friends and colleagues. We are also on Spotify if you want the information but don't want to look at our faces. We're on Spotify as well if you want to give us a listen.
How could they not? For more information on the topics we covered today and more, be sure to check out our blog at blog.stwserve.com. Subscribe to our newsletter, The Weekly Serving. That way you get the latest and the best delivered straight to your inbox. Won't miss a thing.
Absolutely. And for those that want to dig even deeper into learning about your federal benefits and financial planning for Feds, we encourage you to join us for one of our complimentary webinars. We have, I know this is a little tight because this episode is coming out on October 17th, 2023. On October 18th, so tomorrow, from when you're listening to this, we have a You Asked, We Answered special session covering the federal long-term care insurance program. Those of you who are returning listeners of the podcast will recall we did cover some changes that are happening to the federal long-term care insurance program premiums rates for some folks. And there are some choices to be made this upcoming enrollment season, or actually in November. So we're going to have a webinar October 18th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. to discuss those kind of options in detail and get you the information that you need to make smart decisions there. In addition, there's a TSP planning. Speaking of TSP planning webinar on October 19th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Do definitely join us there so that you can learn a bit more about the features of the TSP, investment options in the TSP, and just kind of using that for planning in general, long-term retirement planning. Now, of course, we do love doing our webinars. That's kind of a general education component. If you're looking for a more personal relationship or some more personal education around your federal benefits and financial planning in particular, you can always reach out to our team directly for a financial planning consultation at askstws@stwserve.com. Shoot us an email there. We'll also have a link in the description box of this video that you can click to get more information on that. We would love to talk with you.
Indeed. We love those links. Okay, everyone. Thank you for listening to Fed15. I'm Dan Sipe.
And I am Katelyn Murray.
And we will see you
next week.
There you go.
Bye, guys. Take care. Be well.